For many people, the J word, jazz, sort of instills fear. I've got to play loads of notes. I've got to play really fast. I've got to try and blow somebody else off the stage. Well, actually, no. Jazz is a music about feeling, it's about phrasing, it's about so much more than just the notes. However, if you are looking to get into it, then the tune So What by Miles Davis, which is the first tune on his album A Kind of Blue from 1959, should be in anybody's record collection, actually gives you a really good insight in how to play with feeling and phrasing and just to pick a few really good notes. Let's have a look. So the synopsis is basically 16 bars of D minor, 8 bars of E flat minor, and then back to 8 bars of D minor again. Whereupon you go back to the beginning. More often than not at a gig you might find somebody who's gone back to D minor but thinks it's 16 again. So you have people playing in D minor and E flat minor together or sort of eyeballing each other. Where do we go? Where do we go? That's the only trouble with a tune like this, is that actually you've got to count. You've got to really know where you are. Now that comes out of phrasing. If you play phrases that are a really sort of natural length, the chances are you're going to find that E flat minor transition much easier. Now I've got a backing track here on iReal Pro, which is a great app for iOS and Android, and it allows you to practice. In fact, it's good enough to gig with as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play something over this sequence, and you will basically see, well, you'll hear that it's essentially a very simple form, but just a few things over the top can make a really nice sort of difference. And there we are back at the beginning of the sequence again. So what sort of things was I doing there, and what pitfalls, what notes must I avoid, if any? Well, D minor. Basically what we have is we have the Dorian mode. Now that basically means on guitar, on piano, this is reasonably straightforward actually, and if you are learning guitar and doing some jazz or any instrument, actually this tune on piano is something that you can play without ever playing the piano before. On the D minor you can use all the white notes, and on E flat minor you use all the black ones plus C and F. But you can just get away with just, elbowing the black notes and it'll work. So I've got the Dorian on D. Now what's that then? Well, it's the second mode of C major. So C major does this. Now if I start on the second degree of that scale, I get the Dorian on D. So I get like a minor sound, but just using that C major scale. So, and then I finish on the D as well. So you end up with a scale that does this. And that's what I can use over this. Now, of course, scales are the tools that musicians use to create things. Just going up and down scales is not really going to do anything for you. It's about picking some notes within that scale that will basically make up a little tune or a little phrase that then you may be able to repeat with a little variation perhaps, or play a rhythmic variation on it. So if I also just go over the notes that are maybe slightly tricky, actually the thing that makes this D minor chord minor is the F. It's the third note, or if I go with my Dorian fingering here, it's it's the F there. Now actually, that gives a few problems. It's not really a good note to use in a minor chord, and you think, well, actually, isn't it the main one? That's kind of, it's a bit of a weird one, that. So whenever I play over a minor chord, I either use the ninth, which is the same as the second, like that. Indeed, actually, Ronnie Jordan's version of this, actually, it is actually using that ninth. The other note you can start off with is the fourth note. Like that. Now I'm going to demonstrate that the fact that that minor third, that F, sorry, that one, doesn't work so well over this sequence. So if I just go back to the beginning. So that second phrase I played didn't have that F. It's a bit of a pickle. Now, of course, it doesn't mean you can't use it, but you can use it going from one place to another. So you could start with the root, or you could start with the ninth and play a chromatic scale that actually goes through that F. You can do something like that. Now, in terms of playing blues guitar, if you're a blues guitarist and you know you're pentatonic, actually you can use the A minor pentatonic over a D minor chord. So if you've got this, which you might do if you're playing blues, it'll work over this. So D minor means you play an A minor pentatonic. Let's see what happens with that. Nice. An idiomatic thing like the pentatonic or the blues scale works actually really nicely over here. Now, the other chord is simply a semitone higher. It's exactly the same. It goes D minor to E flat minor. So you just move all the patterns, all the things that you're learning, just up a semitone. Now, it's worth actually anticipating those chord changes. That's a bit of a jazz thing where you actually solo over the next chord slightly before it happens. So if you have, I don't know, I'll just start playing this maybe at the last bar, the last 4 bars of D minor going into E flat minor, you'll notice that I actually start playing in E flat just a little bit beforehand, maybe just as an introduction to that phrase. So here we go, the last D minor. Now ignore those musicians who sort of just play at 1,000,000 miles an hour. There is no point. And actually, if you listen to that record, you will actually hear that none of the musicians on it are really playing fast at all. There's a couple of sort of faster phrases, but they're just worked in to the overall scheme. That's really important to remember, is that actually if you choose 3 or 4 notes to play a solo with, if they're rhythmic, if they're expressive, actually you've kind of nailed what that tune is about. Now that album, as I said, The Kind of Blue, is really, really important to own because it has 2 blues tunes on it. It's got Freddie Freeloader, real bluesy thing, and of course All Blues, which is a 6/8 blues, so that actually is sort of invokes a slightly different sort of way of thinking the timing. Then you've got Blue in Green. Now I've done a video about improvising over that, and then you have Flamenco Sketches, which is the last tune on that record. they are all just absolute winners, and really all do say that jazz doesn't have to be this sort of, all guns blazing 58 notes a second. It simply doesn't work like that. It's about taking a tune like this and seeing what you can do over one chord. Sometimes soloing over one chord is actually harder than soloing over a chord sequence. So, for example, Autumn Leaves is in G minor and the chords change every bar. But actually the scale and the general harmony of it doesn't really change all that much. So there's a little bit about soloing over So What.